Okay folks, so in this video I want to have a look at backgrounds in Photoshop and making sure that you're saving things correctly so you can export them to use in your scenes in Unity. Excuse me. You can see in this scene that I've got a background that I've used a combination of assets that I've got from the Unity Asset Store, but most of the techniques that we've covered in the concept art for video games, you'll be able to create similar art to this. But to speed up things, I've just used some basic art to start with. What I've got is a background that I'm going to use for my game, and I want to animate certain layers of this. So I've made sure to keep things on separate layers. This background is 920 by 1080 in pixels. So when I've made a new document, it's important that you set up your background. We want web because we're dealing with pixels, so the PX means pixels, and you want to go for web large. If you pick web large, you're not going to go far wrong. The one thing I would say is that the background contents, we're going to have it transparent, so I would turn off the artboard. Doing that will mean that we've got a transparent background that we can play with. So the way to achieve that transparent background is to, when the document opens, double click on background. So we just got layer 0, and then make a new background. Now you always have to have one background in Photoshop. If you delete that layer now, and when you see this checkered this checkered area, it means that it's transparent, and that's really important when you're creating assets and backgrounds and anything that you want to include in your game, because you want to keep transparency. If I paint a tank in here and I want that tank to move around my environment, I don't want the white background to come with it. I want it to sit in my environment properly. So let me just repeat that for you again. So we do File, New, and Web Large, and turn off artboards just to keep it nice and clean. You can put a name in if you like, but if you hit create, and then on your layers you want a new layer, and then you can't delete a background when it's like this. See how it's locked? So the quickest way to do it is to double click on it, hit OK, and now you can delete it. So I'm just hitting delete, and then whatever I paint now and save is going to be transparent and fit in with our background. Okay, so let's go back to where were we? Background. Okay, so you can see all I've done here. If we have a look at the layers, I've labelled them. If I just hide these so you can see what we've got. So we've got the main sky layer. Okay, we've got some extra clouds because I'm going to animate these separately. We've got some fog again, so I can animate that separately, and then we've got a sky top as well. So that just gives me 3 different things: clouds, fogs, and sky top, to animate over the top of my background. Okay. Now what we need to do is save these as separate files. So I don't want to save it all as one thing, or else I won't be able to move these things. I want to save them, each one of these layers, out separately. The quickest way to do that is to hide the layers and start with the first layer. So this is going to be my main background layer, and you'll do File, Save As, and we want to change this to PNG. So if we go down to Ping File, PNG, and let me just make a new folder. A good idea is to just have a folder for your game called Assets. Okay, now inside this you can start putting in your different assets for your game. So this one's going to be called Background, and let's just call it Background Sky, and hit save. Large file size should be fine. If we hit OK, and then let's go to that folder. So if we go to it's on the desktop, I think it's this one, assets, No, it's not. It's this one. 2 by 6. Right, and there we go. So we just hover over that, or if we just click this so we can see the details. So that's fine. So the file size is really nice and small, and it's a PNG file. So looking good. So there's our first layer. Okay, next one, I'm going to hide that and just make the clouds visible. And we're going to do the same thing, save as. And we'll call this, let's go back to that same folder. Where were we? I've got so many folders that I've created that are all sort of similar named. It's very messy. This is the one. So PNG again. There we go. So we know we're in the right folder. And I'll call this one clouds. That'll do. I'll just call it clouds. It's fine. Hit save. Okay. Next one. And you see what I'm doing is I'm making the layer visible that I want to see. So this one's fog. Save as. PNG. Let's go fog. Save. And skytop. So file. Save as. PNG. Sky top. Hit save. Okay, so in our folder then we've got our 4 layers, and can you see that this one has got the nice background to it, but these look white, and that's because they're transparent. Okay, so when we get those into Unity, we're going to have transparency, and we can layer them up on top of this background layer. Okay, great. So when you're exporting your assets, that's the best way to do it. Make sure you're working with PNGs, and make sure that if you want it to be a layer that you want to animate and move across another layer, it has to be transparent. Okay, really important. I've downloaded quite a lot of assets from Unity Asset Store to have a play about with, and if we have a look at these, look at some of these sprites, let's open them up in Photoshop and see what we're looking at. So I've opened up this one, grassland sprite, like the ground layer. So you can see this is how big it is. So it's quite small compared to the background. If we go back to that, where is it? This one. See how large that is? That's we're seeing that at 100%. You see down in the corner. That's the actual size it is, and it's still quite small. You see this ruler up here. You can kind of tell how big your images are. So if you go to View and have rulers on, so you turn rulers on, and then if you right click on rulers and make sure you're looking at pixels and not centimeters or points, go to pixels, and then you can roughly see how big your asset is. So this one's about 512 by 512, so that's like a nice thing that we can tile up and repeat and duplicate in our scene. Let's have a look at a few of the others so we can get an idea of how big they are. So I don't know, this coin sprite, let's have a look at that in Photoshop. So open with Photoshop. So you see how small that is. That's tiny. We're looking at 128 by 128 pixels. So that's going to be small on the screen. So we don't need it to be a massive pixel. It's a massive document. We want to try and keep it optimized and clean, so we're not killing the graphics card. So just be aware. A good idea is to download some assets and open them up in Photoshop so you can sort of see what sizes people are playing with. That will give you a good idea of how big things should be when you make them. So if we look at some characters that I've downloaded, so this is one of the characters in the tutorial. So we can see that's about 550 by 500. So again, it's not massive. So just be aware of how big you're working and when you're exporting things. Obviously your background's going to be the largest thing, but your sprites, you need to make sure that they're nice and optimized, and they're not a big blank space with a tiny little asset in the corner. That's a waste of time. and not very clean way to work. Okay, great, so that's the first part of this video series. It's looking at how to export things properly from Photoshop to use in your game. Next video we'll start looking at getting those into Unity.